Hello, and thank you for joining us today for this webinar on what do science teachers find most satisfying about their work. Andreas Schleicher, Director for the Directorate of Education and Skills at the OECD, and Tarek Mustafa, Analyst with the PISA team, are joining us today to present findings from PISA's most recent working paper on science teachers' satisfaction. Science teachers from 19 countries and economies participated in a teachers survey during the last round of PISA in 2015. Based on their responses, PISA looks at the factors that contribute to their satisfaction, not only with the teaching profession in general, but also with their current job. We will have time for a question and answer session at the end of the presentation, so please feel free to send your questions at any time to Eric Magnuson. The PowerPoint that Andreas is presenting, along with the working paper and a PISA-focused brief that summarizes the findings, are available to download. Just click on Handout at the top of your screen to access the results. Now on to you, Andreas.
Thanks so much and welcome. When you think about PISA, the first association you have is, student learning outcomes and assessment and so on. But since 2015, we're actually also collecting data from teachers. We give teachers a questionnaire where they can express their views about teaching and learning in their schools. And we're going to progressively publish those outcomes. And we start with the question that obviously is at the heart of much of this. How satisfied are teachers with their job? And my colleague Tarek Mustafa, who is with me here on this webinar, has done a really interesting analysis that you're going to see here. Just a sort of a bit of background on this. This covers 9 OECD countries and 10 partner countries. So it's still a small set of countries that are collecting data that have given teachers a voice. We're going to hope that this more and more as time goes on. Those teachers that took part were randomly sampled, so they are representing 2 distinct target populations: science teachers and teachers who teach other things than science. And this was a total of around 32,000 science teachers and 63,000 non-science teachers that were surveyed. So it's quite a big sample from those countries for which we have some data. Here's just a list of the countries that took part. I'm not going to go through this. This gives you sort of an overview of where we do have the teachers' perspectives. Why are we doing this? Why are we looking at teacher satisfaction? Because it's actually, one of the main concerns among countries that how are we going to attract talented people into the teaching profession? Issues around teacher supply are becoming a major concern in a fair number of countries now. And this is not just about making teaching financially attractive. It's equally about making teaching intellectually more attractive, finding a kind of work organization and support that gives teachers sort of the sense of being part of a profession. So these were the questions that we asked. We asked them whether they were satisfied with the teaching profession. So this is not, the work they do every day, but generally, the advantages of being a teacher outweigh the disadvantage. If I could decide again tomorrow, would I still choose to work as a teacher? Or the counterpart of that is, I regret that I decided to become a teacher. Or I wonder whether I would have been better to choose another profession. Those are the kind of questions that we ask. But we ask also more specifically about the satisfaction of teachers with the job they do today. I enjoy working at this school. I would recommend my school as a great place to work. I'm satisfied with my performance in this school. All in all, I'm satisfied with my job. So the second question is much more focused about, what does my school provide for me beyond the teaching profession in general? So here are the results. I can look at both dimensions at the same time. On the horizontal axis, you find an index of the satisfaction with the current job, the questions that we asked them, we summarized the results. And on the vertical axis, index of satisfaction with the teaching profession. And as you would expect, both are fairly closely related, but not for everyone. You can see, for example, teachers in Germany or Spain, they are quite happy with the teaching profession, but not so happy with their current job. at least relative to the two dimensions. And the same, the reverse is true for other countries. Teachers in Portugal, they're not really happy with the teaching profession, but they are as happy as German teachers with their current job. And so it's worthwhile to study those two dimensions separately. So let's have a look at some of the data. And since I mentioned Germany as a kind of outlier country, you see the results here for the average of the 18 countries that took part, and blue, dark blue, also the OECD average. And then here, just to give you the contrast of a country, you have very few teachers in Germany who say they wonder whether it would have been better to choose another profession. So they're quite sure that it was the right choice for them. That's not so much true on average across countries, where that percentage is up to 40. I regret that I decided to become a teacher. Very few German teachers do that, but in general, you have only about 1 in 10 who are in a job where they regret to be. If I could decide again, I would still choose to work as a teacher. Look at this, 8 out of 10 teachers on average across countries would make the same choice again. And they also say that the advantages of being a teacher clearly outweigh the disadvantages. Of course, you have to keep in mind that you're seeing the teachers who remained in the teaching profession. Many who might not have been happy might have already left the teaching profession. We don't know about them. We only see the people who are still teaching when these data were collected. But overall, a fairly positive picture, quite high level of satisfaction with the teaching profession. Let's look at the other part of the picture. Am I happy with my current job? And you can see also there, the picture is really positive. All in all, I'm satisfied with my job. You get that response from 9 out of 10 teachers. I'm satisfied with my performance in the school. Also, 9 out of 10 teachers. Recommending your school as a good place to work, a little bit less, but still over 8 out of 10 teachers. And then I enjoy working at the school, up again around 9 out of 10 teachers. So satisfaction with the current job also tends to be quite high. Some variation across countries, as you could see on the preceding slides, but not too much. Now, of course, the big question is, who is more satisfied? And the first thing that we found is that teachers who were more motivated to pursue a career in the teaching profession from the start, when they were in school or after school, they knew that's what they want to do. And you can see the percentage here in brackets across countries. In some countries, that percentage is very high. So you had a large share of people in the teaching profession for whom that was the first choice from the beginning. But you also have some other countries, I point to the United States, it's only about, 27% of teachers who say that was really their kind of original choice. But what's interesting is, and maybe also intuitive, is that wherever you had that as the first choice, it seems that teachers are more satisfied, both with the profession and also with their current job. So, being in the kind of job that was your dream job from the beginning seems to be a good predictor. Some variation in the strengths of that relationship across countries, yes, but overall, it's positive in all senses. The sense of teachers that they can become good at teaching science, and the sense of ownership, the sense of self-efficacy, also a very important predictor for being satisfied with the job. Why do I say this? Why did we measure this? Because self-efficacy, a sense of ownership, is something that we can actually support through the work environment and the work organization for teachers. For example, we know from Thales research, our other survey on teachers, where we can see that teachers who work in a more collaborative environment tend to feel a greater sense of ownership, greater sense of self-efficacy. So it's a construct that we can actually influence. And as you can see here, that sense of self-efficacy is a very important predictor for being satisfied with the teaching profession on the left side, but also for being satisfied with the current job. Self-efficacy with science content, do I feel that I really master the content. I can, explain, teach difficult kind of concepts in science really well. If I have that sense that I'm on top of this subject, I'm on top of this discipline, you can also think that is, in most countries, a good predictor for teacher job satisfaction, or teacher satisfaction with the profession and teacher satisfaction with the current job. And again, self-efficacy with science content is something surely we can influence through initial teacher training, through continued professional development, and many other ways of supporting teachers to be really good in their discipline, in the science field. And obviously, that's also something that students see as a first thing. One of the things that students often realize fast is my teacher really, really good in the subject that they teach. So it's not a surprise that will then relate to being satisfied with your job. Now, here come the more instrumental aspects. What we can see is that participation in more professional development is something that seems to be boosting teacher satisfaction in most countries. Both, the teaching profession and the current job seem to be very closely related to participation in more than 3 development activities in the current school year. Some countries, we don't see that relationship so clearly, and that's not so obvious why that would be the case. But in most countries, you can really see that doing something to upgrade my skills is something that will give me that sense of satisfaction with the job. And it's again something that we can do something about. And you look, for example, we don't have Singapore on this chart, but they give a teacher 100 hours of professional development every year. You can look at Hong Kong, very kind of great emphasis on professional learning communities, or many of the Chinese provinces here right on top, where that relationship is particularly strong as well. Continued professional development is embedded in the work of teachers. There's actually also quite different division between teaching and non-teaching responsibilities. If you are in the United States or the UK, you have fairly little time to do other things than teaching, because the rather small classes they have in those countries mean that teachers have very little time to do other things than teaching. You take the example of China, where teachers teach, maybe 10 or 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 hours per week, and therefore have plenty of time to work with their colleagues, to frame good practice, to participate in collaborative professional development and other things. So professional development, clearly an important dimension. Discipline, that's something that you'd expect that in countries with a more positive disciplinary climate, or in schools with a more positive disciplinary climate, teacher satisfaction with their current job is better. And I'm going to come back to this. And, the first thought that we had as well, that might simply be about teacher demographics, like be more experienced or so on. But actually, even after accounting for this, that's the length of the blue bar, we see pretty much the same picture. So this is not just a reflection of who you are as a teacher. That seems really that disciplinary climate, an orderly, productive work environment where little time is lost because of noise and disorder, where students can learn, where sort of this kind of atmosphere seems to be influencing the sense of teachers of how satisfied they are with their job. Teachers who collaborate with colleagues. This is also really interesting, where you can see basically 4 quarters here. The different symbols basically is the blue triangle are the teachers who collaborate most. That's what they tell us. The yellow bar is the position of teachers who collaborate the least, the bottom quarter. Now, on the vertical axis, you have an index, the index of teacher satisfaction with the profession. So you can really see in every country for which we have data, where there is more of a collaborative culture in the school, that seems to be something that boosting teacher job satisfaction. And again, why is this important? Because we can influence it easily. Some things are expensive. If you want to increase teacher job satisfaction by paying people more or making classes smaller, those are really expensive things to do. Maybe important, but they are difficult to do. Whereas creating a more kind of collaborative climate is really something of good instructional leadership in the school and sort of sufficient time available for this. Those things are doable, and they do matter in virtually every country for which we have data. And so some countries more and some countries less, but in overall, it's a really big factor. And that's also true. You can see the same picture even stronger when it comes to satisfaction with the current job. Your current job at your current school, the satisfaction with it, is quite strongly influenced by the collaborative work environment in your school. Again, some countries a little bit more than in others. Teachers who think that there are staff shortages in their school are less satisfied with the teaching profession. The top quarter here is now at the bottom, the yellow bar, the kind of bottom quarter is at the top. So you can really see that the perception that there are not enough people in my school really can be something that lowers the degree of teacher job satisfaction with the teaching profession. And actually, as you can see also in the next chart, dissatisfaction with the current job. So that's another dimension that is related to resources, or the perception about the availability of resources that we need to keep in mind on this as well. The last point I really want to make is that teachers also seem to be less satisfied with their job and the profession when there are differences between them and their principal on staff shortages. If the principal says, no, we have plenty of staff, and teachers perceive actually we can't do our job because a shortage of staff really hinders learning, when there was this discrepancy in view, you can really see how that influences job satisfaction negatively. It's hard to sort of see what you can take away from this, but it's probably about something of creating a climate in which everybody thinks, we're in this together, we have similar perceptions, we're transparent, we all know that kind of work environment. So it's not just the absolute levels of teacher shortages, but to what extent that perception of teacher shortage is shared between leadership and teachers in the front line. That really matters. And again, that's really the job of great leaders and great principals in schools. Now, I've told you what factors we could identify to be linked with teacher job satisfaction. And there are also factors that we could not see linked with teacher satisfaction. When I say they were not associated, is we couldn't show that level of association. They might be linked in other ways that we couldn't detect with our data. But for example, you might think that if I have a high degree of diversity in my classroom, for example, a large share of immigrant students, more than 30%, that's going to make my life more difficult, and I'm going to be less happy with my job. This is not what we could see. There was no relationship between the share of immigrant students in the school and teacher job satisfaction. Similarly, large proportions of students who don't speak the language of the test, also there, you might think my job is going to be a lot more difficult if I have a lot of languages in my classroom. I have to, cater for so many different experiences, cultural, linguistic experiences. But this does not seem to be something that impacts negatively on teacher job satisfaction. Other things, even class size, the type of disciplinary climate seems to be a much bigger driver of teacher job satisfaction than the size of the class. So if you have to make a choice, providing your teachers with better support, better capacities, and so on, or taking out some numbers of students in the class, it is clear where this leads us. So in conclusion, those people for whom that was the first choice seem to be happier and more satisfied. Teachers tend to be also more satisfied when they work in a collaborative kind of culture in the school, when they have the perception that there's a sufficient number of people and educational resources in their school, and when they have access to participate in effective professional development. And then conversely, we've seen that poor disciplinary climate tends to be undermining teacher job satisfaction. So that's all I wanted to share with you. And as I said at the beginning, we're just scratching the surface of this very interesting new dimension of PISA, the teacher questionnaire. We're going to come back to you with lots of more interesting data on this as time goes on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andreas. We have received some questions from our listeners. One listener would like to know why you focused only on science teachers. What about teachers who teach other subjects?
Yeah, we basically, the PISA 2015 assessment focused on science as a school subject. That's where we sort of put in most of the assessment. And actually, many of the questions that we asked to teachers were related to their science kind of classes, science as a subject. So next time when we do the PISA questionnaire, we're going to focus on another group of teachers. We try to align that with the kind of emphasis that the project gave.
Tarek, would you like to add something? Or
yeah, I mean, to add to what Andreas just said, also in the science profession, science teaching, retention tends to be a little bit lower than in other subjects. That's because there is competition for, people with these kind of competences. For instance, a science teacher could be doing other jobs, for instance, working in a pharmaceutical company or, whichever. So there is attention for these skills. So, and this is why actually we wanted to look at teacher satisfaction, especially science teachers, just to see why, retention could be lower.
Okay, thank you both. I have a more technical question, so I think, Tarek, if you'd like to answer this one. A listener would like to know, how were science teachers sampled?
Okay. So, so as you know, in PISA uses two-stage sampling procedure. So first, schools are sampled to participate in the study, and within each schools, students are selected. And in this case, in 2015, teachers were also selected. So students do not, so they belong to a particular school. However, they do not necessarily belong to the same classroom. And the same for teachers. So teachers belong to the same school as the students, but they could or maybe could not be teaching the students in question. So we don't, in PISA 2015, actually we don't have a student-teacher link. So we don't know exactly whether the teacher is teaching a particular student, but we know that teachers are within the same school of the students. So yeah, this is basically was the same sampling framework. Of course, the teachers who were selected were eligible to teach 15-year-old students, or have taught them in the past, or will be teaching them in the future. So it was a broad definition of what science teachers are, but they have to be teaching a science subject. So teachers of mathematics or languages or physical education or any other subject were not considered as science teachers.
Great. And just a quick follow-up question, do you think that you will have this link in 2018 where you'll be asking this questions to teachers and to their students as well?
PISA is not based on a classroom, so the students do not belong to a class, so we cannot do this link for now. So.
Okay. I have another question actually on trend data. We have data now on teacher satisfaction for 2015. Do we have to wait until 2018 to have trend data on teacher satisfaction? Andreas or Tarek, would you like to?
Yes, obviously. We only survey that every 3 years, but actually there's another survey that we do, and that's the Teaching and Learning International Survey, TALIS, and there's actually some trend data on this available already. We didn't see much change, actually. If we started this in 2008, we had another survey in 2013. We didn't see that much of a change, but it's obviously something that's very important to monitor. And there may be sort of also different country patterns. I think this is a very important dimension to see how it evolves over time. Clearly, teacher job satisfaction is a very, very important dimension influencing the attractiveness of the job, how, and many other things as well.
Okay, thank you. We have another question asking about the effect of teacher salaries on their level of satisfaction. Would one of you like to delve into that subject? Was it covered in this working paper
Yeah, we do not collect the data on salaries in the survey itself, and it's often also constant across countries. And but obviously, it would be possible to link teacher salaries at the aggregate level to levels of job satisfaction. That's something that we could be doing.
Great, thank you. Would you like to add anything to that, or no? I have another question leading up or following the answer that you gave about PISA and TALIS link. Someone was wondering if this this paper also went over data from the teacher survey that is every 5 years. Did it include data from that survey as well?
Actually, the questions, we intentionally aligned the questions so that we can actually link the two surveys. That was one of the, when you look at the wording of the questions, most of them have been carefully crafted so that we can actually maximize the link between the PISA assessment and the TALIS survey. And there's actually several publications on that topic already came out.
Okay, thank you. There's another question about interpreting teacher satisfaction between countries. Is it a genuine difference in satisfaction, or does it reflect cultural differences?
Yeah, you know, that's always a question that is relevant. To what extent are there response behaviors or cultural differences or issues around social desirability in those kinds of questions? I think we have to take these figures at face value. The way we phrase the question is not, you know, simply, are you happy with your job, where you would be very much exposed to biases, but we ask, as you could see, quite specific questions. And we expect that teachers respond to them at face value. We've piloted those questions carefully across countries and cultures, but you can never be 100% sure on this. I think there may well be a moment of difference. I'm saying this also because, for example, you look at some of the results from the East Asian countries where teachers clearly have often more favorable working conditions than in the Western world in terms of salaries, in terms of not teaching working time, and lots of things. But their responses on satisfaction question are a little bit lower. So there may be an aspect of cultural response behavior in this, but that's difficult to assert. I can tell you only that we have designed the question and carefully piloted them with the intention to minimize cultural bias of any form.
Okay, thank you very much, Andreas. We have another question about does teacher satisfaction affect student outcomes? I guess the listener means if it affects disciplinary, climate, or truancy, or better performance.
You know, that's a very difficult question, and you know, we could simply look at those correlations in the PISA survey, but there will be so many other factors confounding that relationship that it's not so easy to answer in a statistical sense. But what we can say for sure is that there is a clear relationship between teacher job satisfaction and teacher self-efficacy. And teacher self-efficacy in itself is at least a necessary, if not sufficient, condition for, you know, being a good teacher. And if you don't trust your own abilities, if you don't think, you know, you master the science content, if you don't think you master the pedagogical strategies, probably you're not going to be a great teacher. So I think there are many indirect links between teacher job satisfaction, motivation, and so on that shape at least the conditions under which teaching occurs. And therefore, you know, I would think that the satisfaction of people with their job is a very, very important and often neglected variable that will, at least indirectly, have important, you know, at least in terms of framing student learning outcomes. But you know, maybe over time, when the link between the PISA survey and the TALIS survey gets stronger, maybe we'll also find methodologies to look at this more carefully empirically.
Yeah, and actually we do have a section in the paper which examines the reverse causation, so the correlation between, well, actually the reverse relation between teacher satisfaction and some of the students' attitudes and outcomes, and we find some positive correlations with disciplinary climate and some attitudes towards science, for instance, enjoyment or interest in science. So.
Okay, thank you very much. We have another question about digital tools and their influence on teacher satisfaction? Does it have an impact on teacher satisfaction using computers and in the classroom?
Well, actually, I think we didn't assess, I mean, the use of ICT in school and how it affects teacher satisfaction as such. But I think, I mean, this could be an interesting question, especially that ICT is being is being adopted in science classes. And we do have a couple of questions, I think, in the questionnaire that we could relate to teacher satisfaction. So this is something that can be done.
Andreas, would you like to add anything?
No, I just agree with Tarek. I think this is a good research question. Again, you know, I'd be always hesitant in interpreting too much in any kind of correlation that we will find between, you know, the availability or use of technology and teacher job satisfaction, because once again, there could be lots of other things entering into that equation. But certainly a really interesting question. To what extent do teachers feel that technology is, you know, enhancing their job, making it more enjoyable, more productive, or, you know, to what extent is it disempowering them? I think those are questions that will be certainly relevant.
Great. We have another question on professional development. One listener was wondering, in your slide you mentioned that the more professional development that teachers participate in, the higher their level of satisfaction is. However, did you also look at what type of professional development that teachers participate in and the effect on their satisfaction?
That is certainly a very good question. And I must say, again, here the TALIS instrument is much better suited to answer those kinds of questions. There we have a much more nuanced pictures about, you know, the type of professional development, the intensity with which it was pursued, how it relates to reward and recognition mechanisms. That's not so detailed in the PISA instrument. So I think we would have to refer to the TALIS instrument. And there actually is a relationship between teacher self-efficacy and the types of professional development. That was in the TALIS initial report. But the PISA picture is not as granular here.
Thank you. And just to follow up on teachers' self-efficacy, could you give some more concrete examples of what types of questions were asked? Because for readers or listeners who don't really understand or are familiar with this terminology.
Tarek, you want to provide the definition here?
Yes, so we have two measures of self-efficacy. One relates to self-efficacy with science content, so how confident they feel in teaching certain science concepts, and the other is about, let's say, the pedagogy of science teaching, so how confident they feel in delivering or in explaining a science concept. So each one was based on, I think, four items in the questionnaire, which we could look at. So, for instance, like asking whether the teacher can explain a scientific concept to the students or to a fellow teacher, whether they are, for instance, when it comes to pedagogy, whether they are confident or, let's say, comfortable in designing an experiment and in delivering this experiment to their students. So there are multiple questions which have been combined into these two different measures. So, of course, I mean, the questionnaires are available on the PISA website, so you could have a look at them.
One listener from Mexico would like to know why Mexico didn't participate in the study. I'm not sure if they did, or not in the main PISA study, but in the teacher questionnaire. Did they respond to, were they part of the countries that responded to the teacher questionnaire?
No, Mexico did take part in the PISA survey, the PISA assessment, but not in the teacher questionnaire.
Okay, because it was optional, correct? For
yes, it was. Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you. One listener would like to know why, I think this listener is referring to the disciplinary climate slide that you showed, why the triangle or the top quarter of respondents, there was such a difference between the top and bottom quarter. I don't know if there is a answer for that?
Well, I think that shows really how much disciplinary climate actually influences directly or indirectly the teacher's perception of, their work and their satisfaction ultimately with the job. So I actually think that's a very interesting kind of dimension here, in the sense that investing in an orderly climate and good student-teacher relationship is really important.
Yeah. Yeah, and as we saw in the last week's webinar, it's very important also for academic resilience for disadvantaged students to perform better in the classroom. We also had another question about the types of collaboration. Did you ask about different types of teacher collaboration, formal or informal, or was it just teacher collaboration in general?
So basically, the collaboration question asked teachers about different types of collaboration with other teachers. So, for instance, I can read, some of the questions. So basically, whether they collaborate for other teachers in designing assessment activities or in providing feedback to the students. So these were also combined into an index, composite index, which we used in this analysis, but we are not looking at a particular types of collaborations between teachers. But this, something that can be done because we have the data in PISA, and I think in TALIS as well, they might have something similar to this.
All right, very interesting. One listener asks if you think collaboration with teachers in other countries could have an impact on teacher satisfaction.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. In fact, we do have some global collaboration exercises underway. One project that the OECD runs is called PISA for You, where actually teachers around the world are working together to find solutions to educational problems. It's been a very successful exercise. Last round, more than 6,004 teachers joined that program. And they all said their primary motivation is that they learn and work with teachers from other places who work differently. There is a great exchange between teachers between England and in China underway, where teachers learn a lot from each other through collaborative environments. I think there's huge potential in this, but it's not so easy to organize.
Okay, thank you. One listener would like to know if the study went into cross-country comparisons, or were you always comparing against the OECD average?
Well, the study provides the data for all countries, and I think it's relevant and meaningful to compare countries and with each other and with other groups. The average is just sort of one reference point, but I wouldn't attribute too much importance to it. We have certainly not done that in the paper.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that's all the questions that we've received for today. So thank you very much, Andreas and Tarek, and also to our participants for your interest in PISA and the OECD's work on education. If you would like to find out more about PISA, we invite you to visit our website, www.oecd.org/PISA. This webinar has been recorded and will be made available on the PISA website. Once again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you all.
Thank you.